Hello and welcome to John's Author Diary for the week ending October the 31st, 2021. This is the Halloween special of John's Author Diary, and like all of my previous Halloween specials, this episode is like any other, except I'm wearing an awesome vampire costume. Now, for those of you watching the video, you'll obviously notice the lengths I went to make this costume as genuine as possible. I'm, of course, a modern day vampire who has done all he can to blend in with the populace. This week has been the half-term break. My wife and son have been at home, so I've done very little in the way of work. I spent a bit of time going over Trial of Thieves, which is the second book in my Dawn of Assassins series. It was previously called A Murder of Crows, but I have changed the name for that. I wanted to make sure that the changes I made to Dawn of Assassins were reflected in this second book. So it's basically meant I've had to add a scene here and there, remove references to an event that no longer occurs, and just tweak little bits here and there to make it consistent. I've also got a new subplot to play with, which is always fun. Not that this book isn't complicated enough with its weaving subplots. So I obviously give myself more challenges than is probably necessary. In terms of reading, I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is one of those books that gets under your skin. It's marketed as a fantasy, but it really isn't. The story is excellent. The world is fascinating. The audiobook performance might be one of the best I've ever heard. And I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but it's not fantasy. It might appear on the fantasy shelves in the bookshop. It might have been nominated for several fantasy awards, but it's not fantasy. Or at least, if it is fantasy, it's fantasy in the way that Robert Holdstock's Mythago Wood is fantasy, or Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5 is sci-fi. It feels like fantasy, but it isn't. It's realism masquerading as fantasy. But this isn't about arguing the borders of a genre or anything like that. There's something very interesting going on in this book, and calling it a fantasy would be taken away from its power. Piranesi is about a man living through something very traumatic. The hints are littered through the text that this is a character living with dissociative personality disorder in order to cope with an awful situation he finds himself. It's subtle, but it's there, and it's disturbing when you piece it together. This is one of those books that I know will stick with me for years to come. This led me on to another book about dissociative personality disorder, Fight Club by Palanhuik. Palanhuik? I don't know how to pronounce it. I've watched the film, so I know the twist, but the book is excellent. The voice is off the charts, and I'm convinced that Tyler Durden isn't the only extra personality inhabiting the narrator. I also read a non-fiction book by Carl Abrahamson called Occulture, which is a fusion of the words occult and culture. This essay collection explores how occult ideas influence the development of art, philosophy, music, and film. If you're interested in things like Carl Jung, Aleister Crowley, and Anton LaVey, this will make for a fascinating and insightful read. So next week, I am back to work on Trial of Thieves, and I need to start packing for my research trip to Egypt, which still looks like it's going ahead. Have to say, I feel like I'm playing a game of chicken and that I can't get fully invested in the idea of going on a trip because of everything that's happened during the past year and a half. In the mindset that I'll believe it when I get off the plane in Cairo. So please let me know what you think in the comments. Hit subscribe, hit like, all that good stuff. And visit johncronshaw.com to get your free copy of Birth of Assassins and sign up for my newsletter. So until next time, cheerio.